talking about diving into SIBO diets, namely the FODMAP diet and Cedar Sinai diets. Today's agenda will start with the role of diet in SIBO, moving into the low FODMAP diet. From there, we'll talk a little bit about the Cedar Sinai low fermentation diet, and lastly, expectations post-SIBO. We hope you walk away from today's session with the following objectives: understanding fermentable carbohydrates and their relationship to SIBO, developing confidence navigating a FODMAP diet, understanding the difference between low FODMAP and Cedar Sinai diets, and overall feeling comfortable choosing which eating program is the best fit for you. So let's start by talking about the role of diet in SIBO. Once SIBO has been diagnosed, you likely have already thought about which treatment option is going to be best for you. You can select antibiotics, herbal antimicrobials or antibiotics, or the elemental diet. And because many people are unique and no one person is the same, you may find yourself selecting a couple of these options as you heal your SIBO. Now, at the same time, the other side of the equation is diet. Each of these treatment options will be a crucial tool in healing your SIBO, but can be further amplified by including diet so that you can really address the root cause of your issue. Overall, the key here is that diet is one of the best tools, but it can't get rid of SIBO on its own. Diet can really help in a few ways, from helping with symptom relief as you are going through repeated treatment courses, or maybe you have a more complex case of SIBO. Leaning into a SIBO diet can help with some of those triggering or painful symptoms. It can also help you with prevention of future relapse by sticking to a SIBO diet for short periods of time, as well as reducing die-off symptoms and improving other signs and symptoms of health. Overall, diet helps to work together with those SIBO options we previously mentioned to help your health holistically. If you're someone with SIBO, you may notice that certain foods may trigger your symptoms versus others. To look at this from a more high level, we see that for most individuals, protein and fat are going to be okay with your SIBO symptoms. However, carbs are really where it will depend. Carbohydrates are going to depend on, number one, the type that you are consuming, and number two, the portion size, in whether or not they may trigger some symptoms for your SIBO. But the general key here is consuming less carbohydrates while suffering with SIBO seems to help most. The reason that carbohydrates have some nuance in SIBO can be well described by this cycle. When we eat a fermentable carbohydrate, we're literally feeding the bacteria in our gut that has overgrown. And as this bacteria gets fed, it produces gas, which fills our small intestine and can result in some of those painful symptoms that you feel, like bloating or constipation or diarrhea, or all of the above. Fermentable carbohydrates can be bucketed into the term FODMAP, and which stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. These are referring to the different categories of carbohydrates that make up those fermentable carbs. It's important to remember that not all fermentable carbohydrates will be triggering, but the key is to find out which ones are triggering for you. And the main trait that each of these fermentable carbohydrates share is they're not easily digested, and they can often be categorized as sugars, starches, or fiber. There are many types of SIBO diets, and the main focus of them is to reduce fermentable carbohydrates. Today we'll be focusing on two: the FODMAP diet and the Cedar Sinai low fermentation diet. At Holistic Health and Wellness, we define a SIBO diet as a short-term tool that will help you identify which foods are triggering and should be avoided as you heal your SIBO. Now let's talk about the first diet option here, the FODMAP diet. So what is the FODMAP diet? At a basic level, this was originally developed as a diet for those with IBS to follow. However, it should not be used to cure IBS. And why was it created and why is it still used today? Because it's effective. It's been seen that individuals who follow the low FODMAP diet saw up to an 86% improvement in IBS symptoms, including pain or discomfort, bloating, diarrhea or constipation, as well as reduced joint pain and aches. When we think about the FODMAP diet with SIBO, there's a little bit of background here. As we mentioned previously, fermentable carbohydrates are hard to digest, and there are two reasons for this. Number one, because enzymes may be missing, or number two, bacterial overgrowth may be present, also known as SIBO. A FODMAP diet can be used for SIBO as a short-term period of restriction, and it definitely does not mean you can never eat high FODMAP foods again. When you're following a FODMAP diet while healing your SIBO, this can be very helpful because symptoms will begin to decrease. Your gut lining can also begin to heal. LPS can also decrease, and your serotonin cells in your gut may increase, studies have shown. And all of this is also making antimicrobials more effective. So how does it work? When we think about the FODMAP diet, it's really a 3-step elimination diet. Step 1 focuses on eliminating all high FODMAP foods. So again, all of those high fermentable carbohydrate foods. Step 2 is slowly reintroducing these FODMAPs week by week. And step 3 is once those triggers are identified or those foods are made clear that they cause issues or symptoms, you can hopefully go back to normal. Some of the pros and cons of this diet include being highly effective in reducing symptoms, empowering yourself in your knowledge and confidence on what to eat and what not to eat. There are many pre-established resources, including the Monash app, and it's helpful for healing your gut lining overall. Some of the cons include that it can take a longer time, it may feel confusing or restrictive, and it is not reducing the gas levels in SIBO, it's just helping your symptoms. So it should be used, as mentioned, alongside one of our SIBO treatment tools, as mentioned previously. Again, going through what FODMAP means, this is referring to the different buckets that make up fermentable carbohydrates. You'll notice here that each of these categories will list some of the common foods that may upset your symptoms and will likely need to be tested and challenged each week to figure out which is most triggering for you. To be clear here, the FODMAP diet is best done with the help of a healthcare practitioner. And if you are watching this, you will know that Katie will be at your disposal for any questions that may come up as you're going through this system or formula. Typically, the first 1 to 6 weeks, focus on eating only low FODMAP foods. The goal is to eat these low FODMAP foods so that your symptoms can get under control before we really start testing or reintroducing these other challenge foods. So weeks 6 through 12 focus on reintroducing those FODMAPs, as I mentioned, and this is done by trying one food from each group at a time. From there, you'll use a 3-day minimum of testing and then resting before trying a new food. And we'll talk a little bit about more of that in the next slide. The third or final step of this formula is after 12 weeks, having the confidence in your FODMAP personalization. So once you've identified those trigger foods, you can continue to avoid them as you heal your SIBO and feel confident what to expect when eating. So let's start with phase 1 and talk a little bit about how to navigate this. In phase 1, as I mentioned, the main goal here is reducing symptoms. When we think about FODMAP foods, we can think about a stoplight as a good synonym here. High FODMAP foods should be avoided during the 6-week period. Yellow or medium FODMAP foods should go slow, maybe use them here or there, but definitely don't rely on them. And low FODMAP foods are full speed ahead. Katie can provide you with the list of what these high, medium, and low FODMAP foods will look like. Finding your FODMAP balance can take some time, and the key to really reducing symptoms and finding that balance is going to be found by testing, learning, and listening to your body. Everybody is different, and working with Katie to find your balance is going to be the best solution here. To reiterate, because each individual is different, half a cup of milk or lactose may be okay for you, but 1 cup of milk with cereal, which also includes fructans, might trigger your symptoms. So it's all about figuring out which buckets of the FODMAP system are triggering and at what amounts. Although this can feel overwhelming, a good pro tip here is keeping a symptom diary to help figure out your balance and, of course, working with Katie. Moving into phase 2, which is the reintroduction phase. For many people, this may be the most confusing part, and it is because you are not reintroducing all of your FODMAPs at once. Instead, you are going to reintroduce one category at a time, not individual foods. So for example, if we wanted to reintroduce fructose into our diets, we would choose an apple. We would not try every individual fruit, and we would test each of these categories one at a time. To put this into a more clear example, mango is a solely fructose food that you would eat for 3 days with the same amount and see if you are getting triggered by a symptom. If after 3 days you notice no symptoms with mangoes, you then take the mango out and rest 3 days before trying a new challenge bucket or FODMAP category. Because the mango does not trigger us in this example, we can assume fructose is not a trigger and move on. After you have gone through each of those buckets and figured out what is triggering you and what is not of your FODMAPs, you, congratulations, have finished the reintroduction phase. You can now feel confident choosing your foods and knowing which foods trigger you and avoid those for now, but not forever. As a reminder, this is a short-term tool to use as you heal your SIBO and should be expanded in the long term once healed. There are many resources that can help you succeed. First and foremost, work closely with Katie. She's happy to answer any questions. You can also look at Monash University. They have a specific app which will tell you what your green foods are, yellow, and red foods are to avoid during this testing period. And remember that this is a short-term challenge for long-term resolution and symptom relief. Here is a quick look at what those challenges can look like. Don't feel like you need to memorize this now, but always know you can come back and watch this recorded session to go through and understand what your week of challenges or weeks of challenges should look like, starting with fructose and some example foods, moving into sorbitol and fructose, mannitol, lactose, and then fructan-containing grain, garlic, onion, and galacto-oligosaccharides. So bookmark this and come back to this as you are moving through your reintroduction phase, knowing that you will test each of these buckets. Now let's move into the Cedar Sinai low fermentation diet, also called the Pimentel diet. The pros and cons here start with pros being there really is no transition necessary. It is lifestyle based and was created to be sustainable, though we will be using it in a short-term basis. It is easy to order out using this diet, and it is more flexible than other SIBO diets as it can include some gluten and sugar. The cons here is that the vegetables allowed may be confusing. It can feel tougher for some blood sugar conditions, and it's a bit more limited for vegans and vegetarians. So what is the Cedar Sinai low fermentation diet? This is also called the low fermentation diet and was created by Dr. Mark Pimentel, who is a leader in the SIBO realm, as a sustainable SIBO diet to keep the gut healthy and prevent relapse. Again, we will be using this as a short-term solution while you are taking your antimicrobial or other protocol. And this is unique from other SIBO diets because it allows grain, starches, and sugars. When working with Katie, the Cedar Sinai diet should be used in conjunction with your SIBO intervention, like herbal antimicrobials. And the principles here include allowing starch in the form of starchy veggies and grains, not going out of your way for fiber. Gluten is okay on this diet. Focusing on easy to digest carbohydrates. All proteins are good and fats are okay. Limiting snacks. Avoiding eating before bed, and avoiding sugary drinks. The food guidelines here focus on vegetables, including no beans or legumes. You can eat anything that grows underground or off a plant. Mushrooms are also okay. Cruciferous veg like Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, broccoli should all be avoided. When it comes to fruit, limiting bananas, pears, and apples as they can slow down your gut, but all other fruits are okay. Sugars should minimize fructose and lactose, avoiding dairy products specifically with lactose, as well as avoiding gums, sugar alcohols, and other non-digestible sweeteners. However, it does call out that sucrose and glucose are okay, along with aspartame. And when it comes to carbohydrates, rice, potato, and sweet potatoes are best. Pasta is okay. And the goal here is simple is easy. So we want white bread versus whole wheat on this kind of diet. Basically, don't go out of your way to eat fiber. And as a reminder, you can always come back to these guidelines and bookmark this or take a screenshot if needed. Following SIBO and getting a negative SIBO test is amazing, but now what? Do we still continue on these diets? So once your gas levels are decreased, you will likely want to continue focusing on preventing relapse and then starting to reintroduce or test some of those foods that previously were triggered. You do not want to do the SIBO diet forever, so work with Katie to figure out your next steps, whether that is slowly transitioning off the SIBO diet or trialing some of those troubled foods. I hope this all made sense, and please reach out if you have any questions. Thank you so much.